I'm Helen Gomez. I'm 34 years old, and I spent my entire life believing I was the family disappointment. When my parents died in that car accident last spring, they left my golden child sister Vanessa their $2.3 million estate, their lake house in Clearwater Bay, and even their prized vintage Mustang collection. Me? I got $50. 50. Not 50,000, 50 actual dollars. With a note that read, "For Helen, to buy something practical." But 3 months later, when Grandpa Eduardo's lawyer called me into his mahogany-lined office in downtown Millbrook and slid that manila folder across his desk, everything I thought I knew about my family crumbled. Inside was a trust fund document with my name on it, $89 million, hidden from everyone, including my parents, for 27 years. You should have seen Vanessa's face when she found out. The same sister who got everything handed to her on a silver platter, who never worked a day in her life, who spent family dinners rolling her eyes every time I spoke, she literally dropped her champagne flute on the marble floor of her new mansion when I told her. The crash echoed through that empty house like her entire world shattering, which, let's be honest, it was. Because suddenly, the family failure, the daughter who never amounted to anything, was worth more than their entire bloodline combined. But this story isn't about the money. Well, not entirely. It's about something far more valuable that I discovered that day in Attorney Morrison's office. The truth about who I really am and who my family really was behind their perfect facades. Growing up as Helen Gomez in the prestigious Rosewood Heights neighborhood meant living in the shadow of perfection. Our house on Magnolia Lane was the kind that made people slow their cars down just to stare. Manicured gardens, a circular driveway, and those tall white columns that screamed old money. From the outside, we looked like the American dream. Inside, it was a completely different story. My parents, Richard and Catherine Gomez, were Millbrook society royalty. Dad owned 3 successful car dealerships across the county, and Mom was president of the Rosewood Heights Women's Club for 12 consecutive years. They threw charity galas that raised hundreds of thousands for local causes, sponsored the annual Millbrook Children's Hospital fundraiser, and their picture was in the society pages of the Millbrook Tribune every other month. Perfect couple, perfect house, perfect life. Then there was Vanessa, 2 years younger than me, but you'd never know it from how they treated her. Vanessa was everything my parents wanted in a daughter. Blonde like Mom, charming like Dad, naturally gifted at anything she touched. Piano recitals, debate team captain, homecoming queen, valedictorian, full scholarship to Whittemore University. She was the golden thread that wove their perfect family narrative together. And then there was me, the glitch in their flawless system. While Vanessa glided through life effortlessly, I struggled with everything. Dyslexia made school a nightmare. I was awkward at social events, too tall for my age, with wild curly hair that refused to cooperate no matter how many expensive salon visits Mom forced me to endure. I stuttered when nervous, which was constantly around my parents' friends. I wasn't ugly, but I wasn't the polished princess they could parade around their social circle either. The difference in how they treated us wasn't subtle. When Vanessa got her driver's license, they surprised her with a brand new BMW convertible, white, like everything else in our house. When I turned 16, they gave me bus fare and told me it would build character. Vanessa's college fund was fully paid for by age 10. I worked 3 part-time jobs throughout high school and still graduated with $47,000 in student loans. Family photos tell the whole story. In every single one, Vanessa is front and center, radiant smile, perfect posture, wearing some designer outfit Mom had specially picked out. I'm always slightly to the side, sometimes partially cut out of the frame, in whatever clearance rack clothes I'd managed to buy with my babysitting money. Looking back at those photos now, it's like I was already being erased from the family narrative one picture at a time. The worst part wasn't even the material differences. It was the emotional neglect wrapped in polite indifference. When I made honor roll, despite my learning disabilities, it was met with a distracted, "That's nice, dear," before they turned back to discussing Vanessa's latest achievement. When I finally saved enough to buy my own used Honda, they forgot to come to the dealership to celebrate with me because they were helping Vanessa move into her new apartment. Even our extended family knew the hierarchy. At Christmas gatherings, aunts and uncles would spend 20 minutes gushing over Vanessa's accomplishments while asking me generic questions like, "How's work?" before quickly moving on. Cousins invited Vanessa to weddings and parties. I usually found out about family events through her social media posts. The message was clear. Vanessa was the investment. I was the liability. What I didn't know, what none of us knew, was that Grandpa Eduardo had been watching all of this unfold for years. While my parents were busy polishing their perfect daughter and ignoring their flawed one, he was quietly setting up the biggest surprise of our lives. A surprise that would flip our entire family dynamic upside down and prove that sometimes the people who love us most are the ones who see our worth, even when we can't see it ourselves.
If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever wondered if you were adopted because you fit so poorly into their world, if you've ever been the daughter who was more burden than blessing, then this story is for you. Because sometimes the most incredible inheritances aren't the ones everyone expects. Stick around, because what happens next will change everything you think you know about family, worth, and the power of being underestimated. Growing up in the Gomez household wasn't just about living in someone else's shadow, it was about learning that your worth was measured in achievements, and mine never seemed to measure up. My earliest memory is from when I was 7 years old. Mom had enrolled both Vanessa and me in piano lessons with Mrs. Caldwell, the most prestigious piano instructor in Millbrook. Every Saturday morning, we'd sit in her pristine music room with its grand piano that probably cost more than most people's cars, trying to make our small fingers dance across the keys. Vanessa took to it like she was born for it. Within 3 months, she was playing Mozart pieces that made Mrs. Caldwell tear up with pride. Such natural talent! She'd gush to Mom, who would beam like Vanessa had just cured cancer. She has the gift. Meanwhile, I struggled with simple scales. My dyslexia made reading sheet music feel like trying to decode ancient hieroglyphics. The notes seemed to swim around the page, and my fingers never found the right keys. But I practiced. God, did I practice. Every day after school, for hours, until my fingers ached and my back hurt from hunching over the piano bench. After 2 years of lessons, Mrs. Caldwell held her annual student recital at the Millbrook Community Center. Vanessa, now 9, was chosen to close the show with a breathtaking rendition of Chopin's Minute Waltz. The audience gave her a standing ovation. Flowers were thrown. Mom cried actual tears of joy. I performed third in the lineup, a simple version of Mary Had a Little Lamb that I'd practiced 1,000 times. I didn't make any mistakes, which for me was a victory. But when I finished, the applause was polite and brief. Mom gave me a quick pat on the shoulder and said, "Good job, sweetheart," before turning all her attention back to preparing Vanessa for her performance. That night at dinner, Dad raised his wine glass. "To Vanessa, our little Mozart! Mrs. Caldwell says she could be performing with the Youth Symphony by next year." No mention of my flawless Mary Had a Little Lamb. No acknowledgement that I'd finally conquered something that had been torturing me for months. The pattern was set early. Vanessa's successes were family celebrations. Mine were footnotes. School was even worse. Rosewood Elementary was one of those private institutions where parents paid $15,000 a year to ensure their children received the finest education money could buy. For kids like Vanessa, who absorbed information like a sponge and charmed teachers with her natural charisma, it was paradise. For kids like me, who needed extra help and different learning approaches, it was academic purgatory. 3rd grade was when my dyslexia was finally diagnosed. I remember the meeting, Mom, Dad, my teacher, Mrs. Richardson, and the school counselor, Mrs. Park, all sitting around a conference table discussing my learning challenges like I wasn't even there. "Helen will need additional support," Mrs. Park explained. "Reading specialists, extra time on tests, modified homework assignments. It's very manageable with the right interventions." Dad's jaw tightened. "How much will this cost?" "The reading specialist is $150 per session, twice weekly. The testing accommodations are included in tuition." Mom looked like someone had told her I needed experimental brain surgery. Is this permanent? Dyslexia is lifelong, but with proper support, Helen can absolutely succeed academically. Many successful people have dyslexia. It's just a different way of processing information. After the meeting, I heard them discussing it in hushed tones in their bedroom. Why couldn't she just be normal like Vanessa? This is going to be so expensive. And what will people think? Dad's response was worse. Maybe we should consider public school for Helen. Let the district handle her issues. They never did transfer me, but the message was clear. I was broken goods that required expensive fixing, while Vanessa was a natural masterpiece that only needed polishing. The academic support helped, but it also isolated me further. While other kids were in regular classes, I spent 2 hours every Tuesday and Thursday with Mrs. Martinez, the reading specialist, in a small room that smelled like coffee and disappointment. Vanessa would skip past us sometimes, arms full of books for her advanced reading group, shooting me sympathetic smiles that somehow made everything worse. By 5th grade, the gap between us was a canyon. Vanessa was reading at a high school level, participating in academic competitions, and being courted by the Millbrook Youth Leadership Program. I was still struggling with grade-level reading and felt proud when I managed to finish a book report without asking for help. The worst part was how they talked about us to other people. At Mom's dinner parties, when friends asked about their daughters, the response was always the same. Oh, Vanessa is excelling at everything she touches. Piano, academics, social leadership. She's destined for great things. And Helen, well, she's finding her way. She's more of a late bloomer.
Late bloomer. That became my permanent label, as if I was a flower that just needed more time to show my beauty, when the truth was, they'd already decided I was a weed in their perfectly curated garden. Even our bedrooms told a story. Vanessa's room was a Pinterest dream. White furniture, coordinated bedding, a corkboard covered with awards and certificates, shelves lined with trophies. She had her own computer by age 10, a television, and a phone line because she was so social and responsible. My room was functional. Basic furniture, hand-me-down bedding, shelves lined with the books I struggled to read. No computer, no TV, no phone, because I needed to focus on my studies without distractions. The message was consistent. Vanessa deserved the best because she was the best. I deserved the basics because I was basic. But there was one person who saw something different in me, who treated me like I mattered just as much as golden child Vanessa. Someone who would slip me $20 bills and whisper, "This is between us, mija." Someone who never missed my piano recitals, even when my own parents were too busy networking to pay attention. Grandpa Eduardo. And as I would learn decades later, he was seeing and recording everything, every overlooked achievement, every casual dismissal, every moment when I was treated like the consolation prize daughter. He was taking notes, making plans, and preparing the biggest surprise of our family's life. Because sometimes the people who love you most are the ones who see your potential, even when everyone else sees your problems. High school was where the family dynamics I'd grown up with crystallized into something that felt permanent and unchangeable. By freshman year at Millbrook Preparatory Academy, Vanessa had already established herself as the kind of student that teachers remembered decades later. I was the kind they forgot by Christmas break. The difference became most obvious during parent-teacher conferences. Every semester, Mom and Dad would schedule back-to-back meetings, Vanessa first, then me. I'd sit in the hallway outside the conference room, watching through the glass doors as my parents leaned forward with genuine interest, taking notes while Vanessa's teachers painted pictures of her unlimited potential. "Vanessa is exceptional, Mr. Davidson," her AP history teacher gushed during my sophomore year. "Her essay on the Industrial Revolution was college-level work. I've already recommended her for early admission to the National Honor Society." When it was my turn, the conversations were shorter and filled with phrases like, "Helen is trying our best," and "we're seeing improvement in some areas." Mrs. Thompson, my English teacher, would diplomatically explain how my dyslexia accommodations were helping, but you could see my parents' eyes glaze over. They weren't taking notes anymore. Dad kept checking his watch. The academic disparity was just the beginning.
Vanessa seemed to excel effortlessly at everything she touched, while I had to fight for every small victory. She joined the debate team and won regional championships. I joined the art club and was proud when my painting made it into the school hallway display, until I overheard Mom telling her friend Patricia that at least Helen found something she's decent at. Sports were another battlefield. Vanessa played varsity tennis from freshman year, her long legs and natural coordination making her a formidable opponent. She looked elegant in her white tennis dress, her blonde ponytail swishing as she served aces that had college scouts taking notes by junior year. I tried out for the soccer team and got cut. Tried basketball and rode the bench. Finally found my place on the track team as a distance runner. Not because I was particularly fast, but because I was stubborn enough to keep going when others quit. My specialty became the 3,200-meter run, 8 laps around the track that required more mental toughness than natural ability. I'll never forget my first race. I'd trained for months, running in circles around our neighborhood in Rosewood Heights, timing myself with Grandpa Eduardo's old stopwatch. He was the only family member who seemed interested in my athletic pursuits. "Endurance is a gift, mija," he'd tell me. "Not everyone has the heart to keep going when it hurts." The day of the regional meet, I was nervous but excited. I'd been consistently improving, and Coach Martinez thought I had a real shot at placing in the top 5. I'd imagined my parents cheering from the stands, finally having something to be proud of. But when I looked up into the bleachers during warm-ups, only Grandpa Eduardo was there, holding a homemade sign that read, "Go Helen," in his careful handwriting. Mom and Dad were at Vanessa's tennis tournament in Clearwater, again. They'd promised to try to make both events, but when Vanessa's match got moved to the same time, the choice was automatic. I ran the race of my life that day, finishing 3rd out of 16 schools. My time was a personal best by 30 seconds. As I crossed the finish line, legs burning and lungs screaming, I looked up to see Grandpa Eduardo cheering like I'd just won Olympic gold. He climbed down from the bleachers with more energy than a 70-year-old should have and wrapped me in a bear hug that smelled like his cologne and coffee. "I'm so proud of you, mija. You never gave up." That night at dinner, I excitedly shared my 3rd-place finish, complete with the bronze medal that felt like pure gold in my hands. Mom smiled politely and said, "That's wonderful, honey," before immediately turning to Vanessa. "How did your tournament go?" For the next 20 minutes, we discussed Vanessa's straight sets victory and her upcoming invitation to the state championship. My bronze medal sat on the kitchen counter, forgotten before dessert was served. The pattern extended beyond academics and sports into every aspect of our lives. When it came time for homecoming, Vanessa was nominated for Princess by 3 different clubs. Her dress was a custom creation that cost more than my entire wardrobe. A stunning emerald number that made her look like she'd stepped off a magazine cover. She went with Trevor Hamilton, the quarterback whose family owned half the commercial real estate in Millbrook. I wasn't nominated for anything, which was fine by me. I'd never been part of the popular crowd that nominated people for homecoming court. I went to the dance with Jamie Chen, a sweet boy from my AP environmental science class who was more interested in discussing climate change than dancing. We had a perfectly nice time, but there were no professional photos, no corsage that matched my dress, no limousine rental. The difference in how they documented our high school experiences was stark. Vanessa's homecoming photos were professionally taken and immediately framed for display in the front hallway. My casual dance photos stayed in a shoebox in my closet. College preparation revealed the deepest inequalities. By junior year, Vanessa had a private college counselor who cost $200 per hour to help craft the perfect application strategy. She took expensive SAT prep courses and flew to visit prestigious universities across the country. Mom and Dad treated her college search like a military campaign, with spreadsheets tracking application deadlines, scholarship opportunities, and admission requirements.
My college preparation consisted of a 20-minute meeting with the school guidance counselor who handed me a stack of brochures for state schools and wished me luck. When I asked about SAT prep courses, Dad said they were probably unnecessary given my test-taking challenges. You should focus on schools that fit your academic profile, Mom added delicately. The financial disparity was most obvious when acceptance letters started arriving. Vanessa got into 7 out of 8 schools she applied to, including her dream school, Northwestern University. The celebration dinner at Romano's, Millbrook's fanciest restaurant, lasted 3 hours and included champagne toasts and calls to relatives. I got into 5 out of 6 schools, including my top choice, State University's education program. It was a solid school with an excellent reputation for teaching training, and I was genuinely excited about studying elementary education. But my acceptance was announced over breakfast between bites of toast, and the conversation quickly moved to discussing Vanessa's scholarship opportunities. The scholarship disparity was the final insult. Despite Vanessa's academic excellence, she received only partial merit aid. The remaining $45,000 annual tuition at Northwestern was considered a worthwhile family investment. Education is the best gift we can give you, Dad declared as he wrote the first tuition check. My full academic scholarship to State University, earned through a combination of my grades, my essay about overcoming learning disabilities, and my track achievements, was met with practical relief rather than celebration. Well, that works out perfectly, Mom said. One less tuition to worry about. What hurt most wasn't the money itself, but what it represented. They were willing to invest everything in Vanessa's potential while treating my achievements as happy accidents that saved them from having to invest in me. But Grandpa Eduardo saw it differently. At my high school graduation, he pulled me aside after the ceremony. While my parents were busy taking photos of Vanessa with her valedictorian medal and college scholarship certificates, he handed me a small, wrapped box. Inside was a delicate gold necklace with a pendant shaped like a compass. He said, "This was your grandmother's. She always said a compass doesn't just show you where you're going, it reminds you how far you've traveled." He hugged me tight and whispered something that I wouldn't understand until years later. "Your journey is just beginning, Mia, and some of the most important destinations aren't marked on any map." I thought he was just being poetic. I had no idea he was giving me a roadmap to a future that would change everything. College was supposed to be my fresh start, but somehow the family dynamics followed me 200 miles away to State University. Even from a distance, the disparity between how my parents treated Vanessa and me remained as stark as ever. My freshman year at State was everything I'd hoped for. Away from the suffocating comparisons and constant reminders of my shortcomings, I flourished academically for the first time in my life. My education professors recognized my passion for teaching and my unique perspective on learning differences. I joined the campus running club, made genuine friends who didn't know or care about my family's wealth, and discovered I had a natural talent for working with struggling students as a peer tutor. But every phone call home reminded me that my success was happening in a vacuum that my family barely acknowledged. "How are your classes going?" Mom would ask dutifully during our weekly Sunday calls. "Really well. I made Dean's List again, and Professor Williams wants me to present my research on dyslexia interventions at the State Education Conference." "That's nice, dear. Did you hear about Vanessa's internship at Goldman Sachs? They're already talking about a full-time offer after graduation." The conversation would shift immediately to Vanessa's achievements at Northwestern, her sorority presidency, her networking events with Fortune 500 executives. My Dean's List honors and research opportunities were footnotes in the epic novel of Vanessa's college experience. The financial reminders were constant, too. While I worked 20 hours a week at the campus library to pay for textbooks and living expenses, Vanessa's needs were automatically covered. When her sorority dues increased by $800, Dad wired the money the same day.
When I mentioned needing new running shoes after mine fell apart during track season, Mom suggested I look for sales and reminded me that I was so good at finding bargains.
The most painful disparity came during family emergencies. Junior year, I got pneumonia and ended up in the campus health center for 3 days. When I called home, barely able to speak, Mom's response was practical rather than emotional. Do you have health insurance through the school? We don't want any unexpected medical bills. 6 months later, Vanessa sprained her ankle playing intramural volleyball. Within hours, Mom and Dad had driven 4 hours to Northwestern, hired a private sports medicine specialist, and moved her into a hotel suite until she could properly recover. The incident was documented extensively on social media with captions about how family comes first and how grateful Vanessa was for the most caring parents in the world. I saw those posts from my dorm room while eating ramen noodles for the third night in a row and felt something crack inside my chest that I couldn't quite name. Graduation illustrated the pattern perfectly. My education degree came with a 3.8 GPA, summa cum laude of honors, and a teaching position already lined up at Lincoln Elementary in my college town of Riverside. I was genuinely proud of what I'd accomplished, especially considering where I'd started academically. The graduation ceremony was held on a beautiful May morning in the university's historic quad. I'd invited my whole family weeks in advance, sent them parking information, ceremony schedules, and restaurant suggestions for afterward. The night before, I got a call from Mom. "Sweetheart, I'm so sorry, but we won't be able to make it tomorrow." My heart sank. What happened? Vanessa's Northwestern graduation is the same weekend, and her ceremony is Saturday morning too. We can't be in two places at once. "But I told you my date months ago." "I know, but Northwestern's schedule must have changed. You understand, right? This is her MBA graduation. It's more significant." More significant. There it was. The truth, wrapped in diplomatic language. I graduated with my teaching degree while my roommates' parents took photos and cheered for me like I was their own daughter. That evening, while I celebrated with friends at a local pizza place, my phone buzzed with Instagram notifications. Mom had posted a dozen photos from Vanessa's graduation, all captioned with phrases like, "So proud of our MBA graduate," and "The future looks so bright." There was no mention of my graduation, no acknowledgement that they had another daughter who had also accomplished something meaningful that weekend. My first year of teaching was transformative. Working with third graders at Linton Elementary, especially those with learning disabilities, gave me a sense of purpose I'd never experienced. I loved helping kids who struggled like I had, showing them that being different wasn't being less than. My classroom became a place where dyslexic kids, ADHD kids, and anxious kids found their confidence. But even my professional success was minimized at family gatherings. During Christmas dinner that year, the conversation focused entirely on Vanessa's new job as a financial analyst at Pemberton and Associates in Chicago, her downtown apartment, her networking events with city officials. When Uncle Roberto asked about my work, I excitedly shared stories about my students' progress, the reading intervention program I developed, and how I'd been selected for the district's new teacher leadership committee. "That's wonderful that you're helping those slow children," Aunt Carmen said with well-meaning condescension. "It's so important to have special teachers for kids who can't keep up in normal classes." The phrase "special teachers for kids who can't keep up" stung more than she probably intended. It reinforced the narrative that had followed me my entire life, that I was suited for the remedial track, helping other people's problem children because I understood what it was like to be broken. Meanwhile, Vanessa's work involved strategic financial planning and high-level client relationships that sounded impressive at dinner parties, even though I wasn't entirely sure what she actually did all day. The romantic disparity continued too. When Vanessa started dating Brandon Clark, a fellow MBA whose family owned a chain of luxury hotels, every family dinner included updates on their relationship milestones. Their 6-month anniversary dinner at the city's most exclusive restaurant was documented like a celebrity spotting. When Brandon gave her a Tiffany bracelet for Christmas, Mom called it so romantic and posted photos that received hundreds of likes.
I'd been dating Michael Santos, a fellow teacher, for 8 months by then. He was kind, funny, and shared my passion for education reform. We spent weekends hiking, volunteering at the animal shelter, and planning lessons together. He was the first person I'd ever dated who truly understood my learning disabilities and saw them as part of what made me a better teacher. When I brought Michael to Christmas dinner, the reception was polite but cool. He didn't wear expensive suits or drive a luxury car. His family didn't own hotels or investment firms. He was just a good man who loved me for exactly who I was, which apparently wasn't impressive enough to warrant the same enthusiasm Brandon received. "He seems nice," Mom said later, which in our family's language meant adequate but nothing special. The engagement disparity was the most painful. When Brandon proposed to Vanessa during a weekend in Napa, with a professional photographer and a ring that cost more than my annual salary, the family celebration lasted for weeks. There were engagement parties, wine tastings, and immediate discussions about wedding venues that cost more per plate than I spent on groceries in a month. Mom cried actual tears of joy and immediately started planning what she called the wedding of the century. Dad opened a bottle of champagne he'd been saving for special occasions and toasted to gaining the son he'd always wanted.
2 years later, when Michael proposed to me during a quiet morning hike at Sunrise Point, the same trail where we'd had our first official date, with a simple but beautiful ring he'd saved for months to buy, the family reaction was distinctly different. "Oh, how nice," Mom said when I called with the news. "Have you set a date? Nothing too expensive, I hope?" There was no champagne, no tears of joy, no immediate wedding planning, just practical concerns about costs and logistics, as if my engagement was a minor administrative task rather than one of the happiest moments of my life. The wedding planning revealed the final layer of disparity. Vanessa's wedding had a budget that could have funded a small nonprofit for a year. Every detail was meticulously planned and lavishly funded. Designer dress, 5-course dinner, destination bachelor and bachelorette parties, professional videographer, and a honeymoon in Switzerland. My wedding planning conversations began with Mom asking, "What's your budget?" in the same tone she might ask about my grocery spending. When I mentioned wanting a photographer, she suggested, "Maybe one of your teacher friends who takes pictures as a hobby." The most hurtful moment came when we were discussing the guest list. Vanessa's wedding had included 250 people, including Dad's business associates, Mom's charity committee friends, and distant relatives who flew in from 3 different states. For my wedding, Mom's immediate concern was keeping the numbers manageable. "You know, Helen, intimate weddings can be so much more meaningful than those big, showy affairs," she said, as if she hadn't spent 2 years planning the biggest, showiest affair possible for Vanessa. But there was one person who saw my engagement differently. Grandpa Eduardo, now in his 80s, but still sharp as ever, pulled me aside during a family dinner. "I want to give you something special for your wedding, mija," he said quietly. "Something that belonged to your grandmother." He pressed an old jewelry box into my hands. Inside was a strand of pearls that seemed to glow with their own light. "She wore these on our wedding day, and her mother wore them before that. I've been saving them for the granddaughter who would truly appreciate their meaning." I looked up, confused. "But shouldn't these go to Vanessa? She's getting married first." And he shook his head firmly. "These pearls have been worn by women who understood what it meant to build something meaningful from nothing, who knew that true wealth comes from character, not bank accounts. They belong with you." As he fastened them around my neck, he whispered something that sent chills down my spine. "Your grandmother always said these pearls would know their rightful owner. And mija, there are more family treasures waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves." I thought he was being sentimental about jewelry and family heirlooms. I had no idea he was talking about something that would change not just my wedding, but my entire understanding of where I truly belonged in our family story.
The phone call that changed everything came on a Tuesday evening in March while I was grading spelling tests at my kitchen table. Michael was making dinner, humming some song from the radio, and our small apartment in Riverside felt cozy and perfect in that ordinary way that you only appreciate in hindsight. The caller ID showed Millbrook General Hospital, and my stomach immediately dropped. You never get good news from hospitals at 8:47 p.m. Is this Helen Gomez? The voice was professional but gentle, the tone nurses use when they're about to deliver life-altering information. Yes, this is Helen. I'm calling about your parents, Richard and Catherine Gomez. They were brought in this evening after a traffic accident on Highway 15. I'm very sorry to inform you that neither survived their injuries. The words hit me like physical blows. My red pen fell from my hand, leaving a small mark on Tommy Martinez's spelling test that I would remember for months afterward. Michael looked up from the stove, saw my face, and immediately turned off the burner. "What happened?" I managed to whisper. The details were clinical and devastating. A semi-truck had run a red light at the intersection of Highway 15 and Oakwood Drive, less than 2 miles from their house in Rosewood Heights. They were returning from dinner at Romano's, the same restaurant where they'd celebrated all of Vanessa's achievements over the years. The impact was immediate. They hadn't suffered. "We've contacted your sister as well," the nurse continued. "She's driving down from Chicago tonight." Of course they'd called Vanessa first. Even in death, she remained the primary contact, the more important daughter. The next few days passed in a blur of funeral arrangements, casseroles from neighbors, and relatives I hadn't seen in years, suddenly appearing with condolences and barely concealed curiosity about the will. Vanessa flew in from Chicago looking perfectly composed in her black designer dress, handling logistics with the efficiency she'd learned in business school. "I've already spoken with Morrison, Blackwell, and Associates about the will reading," she informed me the day after the funeral. "It's scheduled for Friday at 2 p.m. Dad always said they kept everything simple and straightforward." I nodded numbly, still struggling to process that our parents were actually gone. Despite our complicated relationship, despite feeling like the forgotten daughter for so many years, grief hit me harder than I'd expected. They were still my parents. I'd still harbored some deep, stubborn hope that someday they would see me, truly see me, and be proud. Now, that possibility was buried with them in Millbrook Memorial Cemetery.
The will reading took place in the mahogany-paneled conference room at Morrison, Blackwell and Associates, the law firm that had handled the Gomez family's legal affairs for over 20 years. Attorney Patricia Morrison, a sharp woman in her 60s who'd known our family since Vanessa and I were children, sat across from us with a thick folder. "I want to express my deepest condolences to both of you," she began. "Your parents were wonderful clients and good people. This is never an easy process, but they were very clear about their wishes." She opened the folder and pulled out the official will documents. The estate is substantial, approximately $2.3 million in total assets, including the family home, investment portfolios, the car dealership business, and various other holdings. Vanessa sat up straighter, her business training kicking in. I just felt numb. "To Vanessa Catherine Gomez," Attorney Morrison read aloud, "I leave the family home on Magnolia Lane in Rosewood Heights, including all furnishings and personal belongings therein. Additionally, I bequeath my investment portfolio, currently valued at approximately $800,000, my ownership stake in Gomez Auto Sales, valued at $1.2 million, and the vacation property in Clearwater Bay, valued at $280,000. My heart sank with each item. The house where I'd grown up, where I'd spent countless hours reading in the window seat of my plain bedroom, the family business where I'd stuffed envelopes and organized files during summer breaks, dreaming that Dad might one day see my contributions as valuable, the lakehouse where some of my happiest childhood memories lived, mostly of time spent with Grandpa Eduardo while my parents focused on Vanessa's activities. All of it going to Vanessa. I tried to keep my expression neutral, but inside I felt like that overlooked little girl again, watching my sister receive the car I'd worked 3 summers to afford. Attorney Morrison continued reading.
The remaining assets, including the vintage car collection valued at approximately $200,000, and various personal effects, are also bequeathed to Vanessa Catherine Gomez. I was doing math in my head. That was $2.28 million to Vanessa, which left to Helen Marie Gomez. Attorney Morrison's voice softened slightly. I leave the sum of $50 along with this personal note. $50. Out of a $2.3 million estate, I was getting $50. Attorney Morrison handed me a sealed envelope with my father's handwriting on the front, for Helen. Inside was a crisp $50 bill and a note written in Dad's careful script. Helen, you've always been resourceful and independent. We know you'll make your own way in the world without needing help from us. Use this to buy something practical, as you always do. We trust you to be responsible with money, unlike some people who need more guidance with financial matters. Even from the grave, they were calling me responsible while implying that Vanessa needed more support. Even in death, they were framing this massive disparity as somehow being for my own good. The room was silent for a long moment. I could feel Vanessa's eyes on me, probably waiting for me to break down or protest or demand an explanation. Attorney Morrison looked uncomfortable, clearly recognizing how bizarre this distribution was. Is there any explanation for this allocation? I asked quietly. Attorney Morrison consulted her notes. Your father did mention when he updated the will last year that he felt you were financially stable and independent, while Vanessa was still establishing herself and needed more family support to reach her potential. Last year. They'd updated the will after Vanessa's expensive wedding, after years of me supporting myself through college and building my teaching career. They looked at my independence, the independence they'd forced on me by never offering support, and decided it meant I didn't need or deserve anything. Vanessa finally spoke, and to her credit, she sounded genuinely shocked. Helen, I had no idea it would be... I thought they'd split things more evenly. This seems... Seems what? I asked. Extreme, she finished quietly. Attorney Morrison cleared her throat. There is one more matter. Your grandfather, Eduardo Gomez, has also passed, just 2 weeks ago. I believe you were both informed? We nodded. Grandpa Eduardo's death, coming so soon after our parents, had felt like too much grief to process all at once. His will is to be read separately by his personal attorney, Harrison Webb. Mr. Webb's office contacted me yesterday to schedule a reading for next week. Apparently, your grandfather made some very specific arrangements that he wanted handled independently from your parents' estate. A tiny spark of hope flickered in my chest. Maybe Grandpa Eduardo, the only person who'd always seemed to see me clearly, had left me something meaningful. Maybe his fishing gear, or his beloved books, or that old compass he'd taught me to use during our camping trips. Something that would remind me that at least one person in my family had valued me. After we left the law office, Vanessa and I stood awkwardly in the parking lot next to her BMW. She pulled out her checkbook. Helen, this isn't right. Let me write you a check. Half the estate, or at least a reasonable portion. This is insane. I stared at her checkbook and her hands. The same hands that had never had to work for spending money, never had to apply for financial aid, never had to choose between groceries and textbooks. Keep it, I said finally. It's what they wanted. They made their choice crystal clear. But Helen, they left me $50 and a note about being practical. After 34 years of being the responsible, independent daughter who never needed help, this is my inheritance. $50 and the knowledge that even in death, they thought I wasn't worth investing in.
I got in my car and drove the 2 hours back to Riverside, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Michael was waiting with takeout Chinese food and gentle questions I wasn't ready to answer. That night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I kept thinking about Grandpa Eduardo's compass necklace around my throat and his mysterious words about family treasures waiting for the right moment. I'd lost my parents and inherited $50, but somehow I felt like a different kind of journey was just beginning. What I didn't know was that in 1 week, everything I thought I understood about my family, my worth, and my future was about to be turned completely upside down. The week between my parents' will reading and Grandpa Eduardo's appointment stretched like an eternity. I went through the motions of teaching, standing in front of my third graders and helping them with multiplication tables, while my mind replayed that moment in Attorney Morrison's office over and over again. $50 out of $2.3 million. My students noticed something was wrong. 8-year-olds have an uncanny ability to read their teacher's emotional state, and mine was clearly broadcasting distress despite my attempts to appear normal. "Miss Gomez, are you sad?" asked Emma Rodriguez, one of my most perceptive students, during reading time on Thursday. I knelt down to her level, managing a genuine smile for the first time in days. "I'm okay, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups go through difficult times, but that doesn't change how much I care about all of you." She nodded solemnly and handed me a drawing she'd been working on, a stick figure teacher surrounded by smiling stick figure students under a rainbow. "This is for you, so you remember that we love you even when you're sad." I nearly broke down right there in the middle of my classroom. This 8-year-old child who struggled with reading and came to school some days without breakfast had noticed my pain and offered comfort. Meanwhile, my own family had decided I was worth $50 and a lecture about being practical. That evening, I called my best friend from college, Sarah Martinez, who now lived in Denver with her husband and 2 kids. Sarah had always been a straight shooter, never sugarcoating difficult truths, but delivering them with love. "Helen, what the hell is wrong with your family?" she said after I told her about the will. "I mean, I knew they played favorites, but this is sociopathic." "Maybe they really did think I was better off being independent," I said weakly, still trying to rationalize their choice. "Stop it. Just stop. You've been making excuses for them your entire life. Your parents left you $50 while giving your sister millions. That's not about independence or character building. That's about them deciding you weren't worth investing in." The blunt honesty hit me like a slap. "Sarah, no, let me finish. You spent your childhood working harder than Vanessa for scraps of approval. You put yourself through college, built a career helping kids, got engaged to a wonderful man, and you're still apologizing for existing. When are you going to get angry?" "I am angry," I protested. "Are you? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you're still trying to understand their perspective, still making excuses for why they treated you like garbage." That night, I couldn't sleep. Sarah's words echoed in my head, mixing with memories I'd tried to bury. I thought about every time I'd rationalized their favoritism, every moment I'd convinced myself that their indifference was somehow my fault or for my own good. I remembered being 16 and finding out about Rebecca Wilson's surprise birthday party, the same Rebecca who'd been invited to Vanessa's Sweet 16, while I wasn't told about it until after the fact. When I'd asked Mom why I wasn't invited to help plan my own sister's party, she'd said, "Vanessa wanted it to be a surprise for you too." But I'd seen the group chat screenshots on Vanessa's phone. I hadn't been included in the planning because I probably wouldn't understand the vision for an elegant party. I thought about college graduation, sitting alone while my roommate's family cheered for me because my own parents chose Vanessa's MBA ceremony over my teaching degree. I'd told myself it made sense. Northwestern was more prestigious. Her degree was more advanced. Her ceremony was more important. I remembered my wedding planning, how I'd apologized to vendors for my modest budget and felt grateful for hand-me-down decorations, while Vanessa's wedding had featured imported flowers and a live string quartet. Sarah was right. I'd spent 34 years making excuses for people who had systematically devalued me, and I'd become so good at it that I'd convinced myself their neglect was somehow reasonable. The breaking point came Friday morning. I was at school early preparing lessons for the day when my phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. "Moving into the house this weekend. Found some of your old things in your bedroom. Should I donate them or do you want to pick them up?" Your bedroom.
The room where I'd spent 18 years of my life was now just a storage space for my old things that she was ready to discard. The casual tone, the assumption that my childhood belongings were probably unwanted clutter, the complete lack of emotional understanding about what that room represented was the final straw. I sat in my empty classroom, surrounded by the motivational posters I'd put up to encourage my students. You are capable of amazing things, and different doesn't mean less than. And finally let myself feel the full weight of 34 years of systematic dismissal. I called in sick, the first time I'd ever used a personal day for emotional reasons, and drove to Millbrook. I needed to see my childhood home one more time before Vanessa erased all evidence that I'd ever lived there.
The house on Magnolia Lane looked exactly the same from the outside. Perfectly manicured lawn, those imposing white columns, the circular driveway where I'd learned to ride a bike with Grandpa Eduardo's patient encouragement while my parents were at Vanessa's piano recitals. Vanessa's BMW was in the driveway, along with a moving truck. Through the front windows, I could see her directing movers with the same efficient authority she used in her corporate job. She'd inherited a fully furnished mansion and was already rearranging it to suit her tastes. I used my old key, amazingly it still worked, and walked into the foyer. The family photos that had lined the hallway were already being replaced. The few pictures that included me were in a box, marked miscellaneous, while the countless photos of Vanessa's achievements were being carefully rehung in new arrangements. "Helen!" Vanessa looked genuinely surprised to see me. "I didn't expect you today. I was just organizing things. The movers are helping me rearrange the living room furniture." I walked past her to the staircase, running my hand along the banister I'd slid down as a child, despite Mom's constant warnings about it being unladylike. Everything felt smaller than I remembered, but the emotional weight of being in this space was enormous. My old bedroom was on the second floor, at the end of the hall past what had been my parents' master suite and Vanessa's princess palace of a room. I pushed open the door and stepped into a space that looked like it had been frozen in time. My twin bed with its simple blue comforter, my desk where I'd struggled through countless homework assignments, the bookshelf filled with stories about underdogs who triumphed despite impossible odds. Unconsciously, I'd been drawn to characters who mirrored my own experience. On my dresser was a collection of participation ribbons, small trophies, and certificates, the modest acknowledgments of achievements that had never been celebrated downstairs. 3rd place in the regional track meet, perfect attendance awards, academic improvement certificates, my teaching degree diploma, which I'd left here after graduation because there hadn't been a celebration to take it home to. In the corner was a cardboard box filled with items Vanessa had clearly deemed unworthy of keeping. Photo albums filled with pictures of me and Grandpa Eduardo, birthday cards he'd sent me over the years, and small gifts that had meant the world to me. A painted rock from our camping trips, a pressed flower from the garden we'd tended together, a handwritten recipe for his famous pancakes. I sat on my old bed and opened one of the photo albums. Page after page of memories I'd forgotten. Grandpa Eduardo teaching me to fish, helping me with homework at the kitchen table, cheering at my track meets, walking me down the aisle at my wedding because Dad had been too busy networking at the reception to participate in the ceremony. In every photo, his eyes held the same expression: pure pride and unconditional love. He'd seen something in me that my own parents had missed, something that had inspired him to spend hours listening to my struggles and celebrating my small victories. At the bottom of the box was an envelope with my name in Grandpa Eduardo's careful handwriting. Inside was a brief note dated just 1 month before he died. "My dearest Helen, if you are reading this, then the lawyers have begun their work and you are about to discover some truths that have been hidden too long. I have watched your parents overlook your worth for years, and I have kept careful records of their choices. You are not the daughter who needed less. You are the granddaughter who deserved more.
What comes next will shock everyone, but it will not shock me. I have been preparing for this moment since you were 10 years old, and I realized your parents would never see what I saw in you. You are my greatest pride, mija. Everything I have done has been for you. Trust in what is coming, even when it seems impossible. Your real inheritance was never about money. It was about proving that you were always worthy of love, investment, and belief. The meeting with Attorney Webb will reveal the truth I have been protecting for you. You are not forgotten. You are not overlooked. You are cherished beyond measure. Con amor, Grandpa Eduardo. I clutched the letter to my chest and finally allowed myself to cry. Not the polite tears I'd shed at the funeral, but deep, wrenching sobs that came from decades of stored pain, and for the first time, a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, someone had seen my worth all along. Downstairs, I heard Vanessa calling my name, but I couldn't move. In 3 hours, I had an appointment with Attorney Webb to read Grandpa Eduardo's will. And suddenly, I understood that everything I thought I knew about my place in this family was about to change. Attorney Harrison Webb's office was nothing like the polished corporate environment of Morrison Blackwell and Associates. Located in a converted Victorian house on Elm Street in downtown Millbrook, it felt more like visiting a favorite professor's study than a legal office. Books lined every wall from floor to ceiling, and afternoon sunlight streamed through tall windows onto a massive oak desk that looked like it had witnessed decades of important conversations. Mr. Webb himself was a man in his 70s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and the sort of gentle demeanor that immediately put people at ease. He'd been Grandpa Eduardo's personal attorney for over 30 years, handling everything from his business investments to his charitable giving to what I was about to discover were some very carefully orchestrated family plans.
"Helen, my dear," he said, standing to greet me as his secretary showed me in. "I am so sorry for your losses. Eduardo spoke of you constantly, and I feel like I know you already. Please, have a seat." I settled into a leather chair across from his desk, Grandpa Eduardo's letter still tucked in my purse, my heart pounding with anticipation and anxiety. Through the window, I could see the courthouse where my parents had been married 36 years ago, back when they were young and hopeful and probably never imagined they'd have a daughter they'd eventually write off with $50. "Before we begin with the formal will reading," Mr. Webb said, settling back into his chair, "I want you to understand something important. Your grandfather was one of the most meticulous men I've ever known. He didn't make decisions lightly, and everything we're about to discuss has been planned with extraordinary care over many, many years." He pulled out a thick folder, much thicker than the slim document Attorney Morrison had read from the previous week. "Eduardo came to see me for the first time about your situation when you were 10 years old. He was concerned about what he called the growing disparity in how you and Vanessa were being treated. At first, I thought he might be overreacting. Grandparents often see family dynamics differently than parents do. But over the years, as he continued to document incidents and share his observations, I began to understand that his concerns were not only valid, but prophetic." My hands gripped my chair. "He was documenting things?" Mr. Webb nodded gravely. "Eduardo kept detailed records, Helen, not out of maliciousness toward your parents, but out of love for you. He saw a pattern developing that troubled him deeply, and he wanted to ensure that someday there would be concrete evidence of what you endured." He opened the folder and pulled out a bound document that looked like a small book. This is what Eduardo called his love letters to Helen, a chronological record of family events, financial decisions, and incidents that demonstrated the systematic favoritism you experienced. I stared at the document, hardly believing what I was hearing. He kept records? Meticulous records. Would you like me to share some examples? I think it will help you understand the scope of what your grandfather observed and why he made the decisions he did. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Mr. Webb opened to a page marked with a yellow tab. June 15th, 1999. Helen's 16th birthday. Quote, "Helen received a calculator and a lecture about saving for college. Vanessa's 16th birthday 3 years later,
luxury hotel weekend, new wardrobe, BMW convertible. Total expenditure comparison, Helen, $47, Vanessa, $38,000. Richard's justification when I questioned this, Helen is more responsible and doesn't need extras. End quote. The specific numbers hit me like physical blows. $47 versus $38,000. I'd known there was a disparity, but seeing it quantified so starkly was devastating. He flipped to another marked page, September 22nd, 2003. Helen made Dean's List for the third consecutive semester while working 20 hours per week at campus library. Called to share the news during Sunday family dinner. Richard's response, "That's nice, honey," before immediately changing subject to discuss Vanessa's sorority social events. No acknowledgement, no celebration, no recognition. Meanwhile, Vanessa's C+ in accounting was met with hiring an $80 per hour tutor and promises that grades don't define worth. End quote. My throat tightened. I remembered that phone call, remembered how deflated I'd felt when Dad dismissed my academic achievement like it was routine small talk. May 12th, 2007, Helen's college graduation. Mr. Webb's voice grew softer. Quote, Helen graduated summa cum laude with education degree and secured teaching position. Parents chose to attend Vanessa's Northwestern MBA ceremony instead, despite Helen announcing her date first. Helen celebrated with roommate's family, while her own parents posted dozens of social media photos celebrating Vanessa as future business leader. Investment in Helen's celebration, $0. Investment in Vanessa's celebration, weekend hotel suite, dinner at the city's most expensive restaurant, professional photographer, graduation gift of $5,000. End quote. The room felt like it was spinning. He documented everything. Every overlooked achievement, every celebration I'd been excluded from, every time my parents had chosen Vanessa's mediocre accomplishments over my genuine successes. Mr. Webb continued turning pages, each entry revealing another piece of evidence I'd tried to rationalize away over the years. The Christmas when Vanessa got the car I'd worked 3 summers to afford. The family vacation to Europe that I wasn't invited on because it was Vanessa's graduation gift and there wasn't room for everyone. The engagement party thrown for Vanessa while my engagement announcement was met with concerns about wedding budgets. But the most telling entries, Mr. Webb said, reaching a section marked with a red tab, involve your parents' conversations with Eduardo about their estate planning. He cleared his throat and began reading. March 18th, 2019. Richard and Catherine visited today to discuss will updates. Direct quote from Richard. Helen has always been self-sufficient. She doesn't need help from us. She's proven that by putting herself through college and building her own life. Vanessa is different. She's used to a certain lifestyle and needs our support to maintain the social connections that will help her career. We're going to leave the bulk of the estate to Vanessa because Helen won't miss what she never expected to have. The words landed like physical blows. My own father, discussing my inheritance like I was an afterthought, justifying giving me nothing by claiming I was too independent to need support. Catherine's response was equally revealing. Quote, Helen has always been the strong one. She'll understand that we're trying to help the daughter who needs it more. We raised her to be practical and self-reliant.
She'll probably appreciate not having to deal with the responsibility of managing a large inheritance, end quote. I felt like I was drowning. They'd turned my forced independence, the self-reliance they'd never given me a choice about, into justification for cutting me out of their estate. They'd decided that because I'd survived their neglect, I deserved more neglect. Eduardo's response to this conversation, Mr. Webb said gently, was immediate and decisive. That same day, he came to my office and said, Harrison, it's time to activate the plan we've been building for Helen. Her parents have made their choice clear. Now it's time for me to make mine. He closed the record book and pulled out a different document, this one bearing official seals and legal formatting that made my pulse quicken. Helen, your grandfather established a trust fund in your name when you were 7 years old, right after that piano recital where your achievement was ignored while Vanessa was celebrated. He initially funded it with $100,000 and made strategic investments over the following 27 years. My mouth went dry. A trust fund? Eduardo was a brilliant investor, Helen. He had a gift for identifying undervalued stocks and emerging markets, but more importantly,
He had an absolute commitment to ensuring that you would someday have concrete proof of your worth, not just in his eyes, but in terms that even your parents couldn't rationalize away. He slid the document across the desk to me. At the top, in official letterhead, I saw my name, Helen Marie Gomez Trust Fund. The current value of your trust fund, Mr. Webb said quietly, as of this morning's market close, is $89,237,412. The number didn't compute. I read it again. $89 million. More than twice what my parents' entire estate had been worth. Hidden away, growing in value for 27 years, while my parents convinced themselves and everyone else that I was the daughter who didn't need support. I don't understand, I whispered. How is this possible? Eduardo was a brilliant investor, Helen. He had a gift for identifying undervalued stocks and emerging markets. But more importantly, he had an absolute commitment to ensuring that you would someday have concrete proof of your worth, not just in his eyes, but in terms that even your parents couldn't rationalize away. He slid the document across the desk to me. At the top, in official letterhead, I saw my name, Helen Marie Gomez Trust Fund. The current value of your trust, Mr. Webb said quietly, as of this morning's market close, is $89,237,412. The number didn't compute. I read it again. $89 million. More than twice what my parents' entire estate had been worth. Hidden away, growing in value for 27 years, while my parents convinced themselves and everyone else that I was the daughter who didn't need support. I don't understand, I whispered. How is this possible? Eduardo was a brilliant investor, Helen. He had a gift for identifying undervalued stocks and emerging markets. But more importantly, he had an absolute commitment to ensuring that you would someday have concrete proof of your worth, not just in his eyes, but in terms that even your parents couldn't rationalize away. He slid the document across the desk to me. Helen, your grandfather established a trust fund in your name when you were 7 years old, right after that piano recital where your achievement was ignored while Vanessa was celebrated. He initially funded it with $100,000 and made strategic investments over the following 27 years. He had a way of catching words that would fly by everyone else and holding them until I realized they were there for me. He handed me another document. There's more. Eduardo also established an education foundation in your name, funded with an additional $10 million, specifically to help children with learning disabilities access the resources they need. He wanted you to have the power to ensure that other kids like you never feel as overlooked as you did. I stared at the papers in my hands, numbers and legal language swimming through my tears. $89 million. A foundation to help kids like me? Evidence that someone had been keeping score of every injustice and working quietly to balance the scales. When can I couldn't form complete sentences. The trust becomes fully accessible to you immediately. Eduardo left specific instructions that you should have complete control over your inheritance without any oversight or restrictions. He said, and I quote, Helen has spent her entire life proving she can be trusted with responsibility. It's time to trust her with the power to change her life and help others. As I sat in that book-lined office holding documents that represented more money than I'd ever dreamed of, I realized that Grandpa Eduardo had done something far more valuable than leaving me wealthy. He'd spent 27 years proving that I had always been seen, always been valued, always been worthy of investment and belief. The question now was what I was going to do with that proof. I sat in my car outside Attorney Webb's office for 20 minutes, staring at the trust fund documents in my lap like they might disappear if I looked away. $89 million. The number felt surreal, impossible, like something that happened to other people in movies or lottery commercials. But the official seals, the legal language, the decades of documented evidence, it was all undeniably real. My phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. Helen, where are you? I found more of your stuff. The movers want to know if you're coming back for it or if I should just donate everything. The casual dismissiveness in her message, arriving at this exact moment, felt like the universe underlining the point Grandpa Eduardo had been making for 27 years. Even now, even after inheriting millions from our parents, Vanessa was treating my belongings like inconvenient clutter to be discarded. I drove back to the house on Magnolia Lane in a daze, the trust fund papers secured in my purse like a ticking bomb. The moving truck was still there, and I could see Vanessa through the front windows directing workers with the authority of someone who'd never questioned her right to take up space in the world. When I walked through the front door, she looked up from her clipboard with barely concealed impatience. Finally! I was about to just have them donate everything. There are boxes of your old books and some photo albums. I don't know why you kept all this stuff. Most of it looks like junk from middle school. Junk? 20 years of memories, achievements, and memoirs from the one person who'd believed in me. Dismissed as junk by the sister who inherited millions without ever having to prove she deserved it. Actually, I said quietly, we need to talk.
Something in my tone made her pause. She handed her clipboard to one of the movers and turned to face me fully for the first time since I'd arrived. "What's wrong? You look weird." I pulled the trust fund documents from my purse. "I just came from Grandpa Eduardo's will reading." "Oh, right, I forgot that was today. Did he leave you his fishing gear or something? I know you two were close." The dismissive tone was so automatic, so casually condescending, that it crystallized everything I'd been feeling. "He left me $89 million. The words hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Vanessa's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, disbelief, shock, and then something that looked like panic. "I'm sorry, what?" I held up the documents. "A trust fund, established when I was 7 years old, grown to $89 million through 27 years of careful investments, plus a $10 million foundation for children with learning disabilities." She stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. That's not possible. Grandpa Eduardo he didn't have that kind of money." "Apparently he did. Attorney Webb showed me the investment records. Grandpa Eduardo was a very successful businessman who happened to be an even better investor." Vanessa sank into one of the antique chairs she'd been rearranging. $99 million? $99 million total, yes. The silence stretched between us. I watched her processing the information, saw the exact moment when the full implications hit her. Her inheritance from our parents, $2.3 million, that had seemed so substantial a week ago, was suddenly dwarfed by what I'd just received. The sister she'd always looked down on, the one who'd gotten $50 from their parents, was now worth more than 40 times what she had. "Why?" she whispered. I sat down across from her, suddenly feeling calmer than I had in years, because Grandpa Eduardo kept detailed records of how Mom and Dad treated us. Every birthday where you got thousands and I got a calculator. Every celebration you had that I was excluded from. Every dollar they spent on your success while telling me I was too independent to need help. Her face was pale now. Records? 27 years of documentation. Dates, amounts, conversations, including the conversation where Mom and Dad told him they were leaving me $50 because I was self-sufficient and wouldn't miss what I never expected to have. Vanessa flinched like I'd slapped her. "Helen, I didn't know." "You knew exactly what was happening, Vanessa. You just never cared because you were benefiting from it." She opened her mouth to protest, but I held up my hand. "Let me tell you what else Attorney Webb showed me. June 2018, you needed money for a down payment on your Chicago apartment. Mom and Dad gave you $40,000 as a gift and told the family you'd saved it yourself through smart budgeting. The same month, when I mentioned needing a new car because mine was breaking down every week, Dad suggested I look into financing options and reminded me that teachers make steady, if modest, incomes." Her mouth opened and closed without sound. August 2019, your wedding. Total family contribution, $120,000 for venues, catering, photography, and your honeymoon in Switzerland. My wedding, 6 months later, Mom asked if I was sure I needed professional photography and suggested I serve pasta instead of the dinner I'd planned to keep costs reasonable. "Helen, stop." March 2020, you lost your job during the pandemic. Mom and Dad sent you $3,000 a month for 8 months to cover your expenses while you figured things out.
When I mentioned during a family call that teachers were buying classroom supplies with their own money because of budget cuts, Mom said it was noble how teachers sacrifice for their calling. Each example landed like a physical blow. Vanessa's face was red now, tears starting to form in her eyes. "I never asked them to do those things," she said weakly. "But you never questioned them either. You never wondered why you deserved financial support while I deserved lectures about independence. You never thought it was strange that every family investment went to you while every family expectation fell on me." She was crying now, but I felt nothing but a strange, cold clarity. "The worst part," I continued, "isn't even the money. It's that you all convinced yourself this was somehow fair. That because I survived your neglect, I deserved more neglect. That because I succeeded despite getting no help, I didn't deserve any recognition." "What do you want me to say?" she sobbed. "That I'm sorry? That I should have spoken up? I can't change what happened." I stood up and walked to the mantelpiece where Mom had displayed our childhood photos. In every single one, Vanessa was centered, highlighted, celebrated. I was an afterthought, sometimes liminally cropped out of the frame. I turned back to her. "Do you know what really breaks my heart, Vanessa? It's not that Mom and Dad left me $50. It's that even now, even after finding out I'm worth more than our entire family combined, your first instinct was to call my childhood memories junk and treat me like I was inconveniencing you by existing." She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. "So what happens now?" I picked up my purse and headed toward the door. "Now you get to keep the house, the car collection, and the $2 million that Mom and Dad thought was enough to set you up for life.
And I get to decide what to do with the $99 million that Grandpa Eduardo spent nearly 3 decades accumulating because he actually saw my worth." At the door, I paused. "Oh, and Vanessa, you can donate those boxes of my junk. I don't need anything from this house anymore. I have everything I need." As I walked to my car, I heard her call after me. "Helen, wait. We can work this out. We're still sisters." But I didn't turn around. For the first time in my life, I was walking away from my family's drama with my head held high and my future secured by someone who had truly loved me. The girl who'd been worth $50 to her parents had just discovered she'd been worth nearly $100 million to her grandfather. And suddenly, their opinion of my value seemed completely irrelevant. What mattered now was deciding what to do with this incredible gift, and whether the family who'd overlooked me for 34 years deserved any part of the life I was about to build. The drive back to Riverside felt different. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't replaying family conversations in my head, analyzing what I could have said differently, or wondering if I'd been too harsh. Instead, I was thinking about possibilities, what I could do with $89 million, how I could change not just my own life, but the lives of countless children who struggled the way I had. Michael was grading papers at our kitchen table when I walked in, his red pen moving methodically across math worksheets. He looked up with the gentle smile that had first attracted me to him 3 years ago. "How was the lawyer meeting? Did your grandfather leave you something meaningful?" I sat down across from him and slid the trust fund documents across the table. He left me everything meaningful. Michael glanced at the papers, then did a double take when he saw the numbers. His pen fell from his hand exactly the way mine had at Attorney Webb's office. "Helen, is this real?" "Very real. $89 million plus a $10 million foundation for children with learning disabilities." He stared at me for a long moment, then started laughing, not the bitter laugh of disbelief, but the genuine, joyful laughter of someone who just watched justice served on a silver platter. The girl who'd been worth $50 to her parents had just discovered she'd been worth nearly $100 million to her grandfather. And suddenly, their opinion of my value seemed completely irrelevant. What mattered now was deciding what to do with this incredible gift, and whether the family who'd overlooked me for 34 years deserved any part of the life I was about to build. We spent the next 3 hours talking about possibilities. Michael's first instinct was the same as mine. How could we use this money to help kids? We could fund reading specialists for every elementary school in 3 counties.
We could create scholarship programs for students with learning disabilities. We could revolutionize how dyslexic children receive support. We should call an attorney and a financial advisor. This is life-changing money, Helen. We need to be smart about it. But before I could make any calls, my phone started ringing. The caller ID showed Vanessa's number. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again and again. By the fourth call, Michael raised an eyebrow. You might want to answer that before she shows up at our door. I picked up on the sixth ring. What, Vanessa? Her voice was shaky, desperate, in a way I'd never heard before. Helen, I've been thinking about everything you said, and you're right. I was wrong. We were all wrong. I want to make this right. There's nothing to make right. You got what Mom and Dad wanted you to have. I got what Grandpa Eduardo wanted me to have. Everyone's wishes were honored. But we're family. Are we? Because for 34 years, it felt like I was the unwanted cousin who happened to live in your house. Silence on the other end. Then, I'm driving to Riverside. We need to talk in person. No, we don't. Helen, please. I know I messed up. I know I was spoiled and selfish, and I took everything for granted. But I love you. You're my sister. The words that might have moved me a week ago now felt hollow. Vanessa, where was this love when I was working 3 jobs to pay for college while you got a full ride from Mom and Dad? Where was this sisterly affection when I graduated summa cum laude and you didn't even call to congratulate me? Where was this family loyalty when you called my childhood belongings junk this afternoon? I was young and stupid. You're 32 years old. You've been an adult for 14 years. This isn't about being young and stupid. This is about who you are. Another long pause. Then her voice changed, becoming more calculated. Look, I know you're angry, but let's be practical. This money changes things for our whole family. We could pool our resources, make some real investments. I have connections in Chicago, financial advisors who work with high net worth individuals. And there it was. Less than 6 hours after learning about my inheritance, Vanessa was already trying to figure out how to benefit from it. Goodbye, Vanessa. I hung up and immediately blocked her number. But the calls didn't stop. Over the next 2 days, my phone rang constantly. Relatives I hadn't heard from in years, suddenly eager to check in and see how I was handling all the recent changes. Uncle Roberto called to suggest a family investment opportunity in his construction business. Aunt Carmen wanted to discuss how my good fortune could help fund her daughter's private school tuition. Cousin Patricia suddenly remembered how close we used to be and wondered if I'd like to invest in her new boutique.
Each call followed the same pattern. Brief condolences about Grandpa Eduardo, enthusiastic congratulations about my blessing, and then a pitch for how I could share that blessing with family members who were struggling or had such great business ideas but lacked capital. The most insulting call came from my Uncle David, Dad's brother, who'd never spoken to me for more than 5 minutes at family gatherings. Helen, sweetheart, I always knew Eduardo had a soft spot for you. Listen, your Aunt Linda and I have been looking at this beautiful condo in Florida for our retirement, but we're just a little short on the down payment. It's only about $200,000, which I know seems like a lot, but for someone in your position now, $200,000? 4 times what my parents' entire estate had been worth to them when they calculated my value. Uncle David was asking for it like he was requesting a small favor. Uncle David, I said calmly, when I was struggling to pay for college, did you ever offer to help with tuition? Well, that was different. You were young, and we thought, when I got engaged, did you contribute to my wedding fund? Helen, where is this coming from? When I was buying my first car with money I saved from working at the campus library, did you offer assistance? Silence. For 34 years, I was family when it came to attending events and bringing dishes to potluck dinners, but I was never family when it came to receiving help or investment. Now that I have money, suddenly everyone remembers my phone number. I hung up and blocked his number too. The pattern was so predictable, it would have been funny if it weren't so pathetic.
These people had watched my parents systematically undervalue me for decades without saying a word. They'd attended Vanessa's lavish wedding and my modest ceremony with the same level of enthusiasm they'd show for a casual barbecue. They'd celebrated her achievements while treating mine like participation trophies. But now that I had more money than all of them combined, I was suddenly the beloved family member everyone wanted to reconnect with. Michael found me crying in our bedroom after Uncle David's call. What's wrong? They're all calling. Everyone. Relatives I haven't talked to in years, suddenly wanting to invest my money in their dreams and schemes. Not one of them has asked how I'm doing or if I need support processing Grandpa Eduardo's death. They just want to know how they can benefit from my inheritance. He sat on the bed beside me and pulled me close. I'm sorry, Helen, but maybe this is actually a gift too. How? Now you know exactly who they really are. No more wondering if they actually care about you or if you're being too sensitive about family dynamics. Their true feelings are on full display. He was right. In less than 48 hours, my entire extended family had revealed that their interest in me was directly proportional to my net worth. The same people who had never invested a dollar or a moment of genuine concern in my well-being were now lining up to explain why I owed them portions of my inheritance. That evening, I made 2 important calls. The first was to Attorney Webb. I want to set up a meeting with financial advisors. I want to establish the foundation immediately and start making plans for how to responsibly manage this inheritance. Excellent choice, Helen. Eduardo would be proud. I'll set up meetings with our most trusted partners. The second call was to my principal, Mrs. Rodriguez. I need to request a meeting about potentially taking a sabbatical next year. I want to focus on starting a foundation for children with learning disabilities. Helen, that sounds amazing! Of course, we can discuss options. As I hung up the phone, I realized that for the first time in my adult life, I was making decisions based on what I wanted to do, rather than what I could afford to do. The scared little girl who'd accepted $50 and a lecture about being practical was gone. In her place was a woman with the resources to change lives, starting with her own. But first, I had to decide which family members, if any, deserved a place in the new life I was about to build. Because suddenly, that decision was entirely mine to make. 2 weeks after I'd blocked half my family's phone numbers, I was finally starting to feel peace. Michael and I had met with 3 different financial advisors and selected a team that specialized in philanthropic wealth management. The Helen Gomez Foundation for Learning Differences was already in the legal formation process, and I'd begun researching schools and programs that could benefit from our first wave of grants. For the first time in my adult life, I was making plans based on dreams rather than limitations. We were looking at houses with enough space for the home office I'd need to manage foundation business. I was designing reading programs that could be implemented in schools across 3 states. I was sketching out ideas for a summer camp where kids with dyslexia and ADHD could build confidence while learning that different didn't mean less than. It felt like breathing freely after holding my breath for 34 years. Then, on a Tuesday morning, while I was reviewing grant applications from teachers requesting funding for reading specialists, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Vanessa standing on my front porch, but she looked different. Disheveled, with dark circles under her eyes and her usually perfect hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. "What are you doing here, Vanessa?" "We need to talk. Please, Helen. It's important." I thought I made it clear that we don't have anything to discuss.
Her eyes filled with tears. Not the calculated tears I'd seen during our confrontation at the house, but genuine distress. It's about the house, and the dealership, and everything. Despite my better judgment, I let her in. She collapsed onto my couch like she'd been carrying a tremendous weight. "What's wrong?" I asked, staying standing by the door. "I'm going to lose everything," she whispered. "The house, the business, all of it. The lawyers called yesterday. There are debts I didn't know about. Massive debts." I felt a familiar tug of concern, the same instinct that had made me rationalize their favoritism for decades. But I forced myself to stay objective. "What kind of debts?" "Business loans against the dealership that Dad never mentioned. A second mortgage on the house that Mom took out 2 years ago. Credit lines that were personally guaranteed. The lawyers estimate it's about $3.2 million total." The number hit me like a physical blow.
More than the entire value of the estate she'd inherited. How is that possible? Vanessa looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. Brandon left me 3 months ago. Did you know that? He moved out the day before I found out about the debts, took half our savings and filed for divorce, said he didn't sign up for financial instability. I hadn't known that. Despite blocking her calls, I felt a pang of sympathy for her. Whatever else Vanessa was, she genuinely loved Brandon, and his abandonment in her moment of crisis was cruel. I'm sorry about Brandon, I said quietly, but I still don't understand how this became a crisis so quickly. The business was failing, Helen. Had been for 2 years. Dad was borrowing against everything to keep it afloat, but he never told anyone how bad it was. He used the house as collateral, took out personal loans, maxed out business credit lines. He thought he could turn it around before anyone found out. She pulled a folder from her purse and handed it to me. Inside were bank statements, loan documents, and legal notices that painted a picture of financial desperation I'd never suspected. Mom knew it? I asked, scanning the documents. She had to have known about some of it. The second mortgage required her signature. But I think they were both hoping something would save them. Maybe that's why they held on to their estate plan. They thought they could protect at least something for me. The irony was staggering. My parents had left me $50 while giving Vanessa an inheritance that was actually negative $900,000 once the debts were calculated. What are you asking me to do, Vanessa? She looked up at me with desperate eyes. Help me save the house. Please. I know you're angry with me and you have every right to be, but this was our childhood home. It's where Grandpa Eduardo taught you to play chess in the sunroom. It's where he helped you with homework at the kitchen table. Don't let them take it. The guilt trip was expertly delivered, targeting every emotional memory I had of that house. But this time, instead of feeling obligated, I felt clarity. Vanessa, you called my childhood belongings junk 2 weeks ago. You were ready to donate photo albums of me and Grandpa Eduardo because they were cluttering up your inheritance. Now you want me to pay $3.2 million to preserve the house where those memories were made? I was wrong about that. I was wrong about everything. You were wrong, but only because the financial situation has changed. If those debts didn't exist, if you'd inherited $2.3 million free and clear, would you be here apologizing? Would you be acknowledging how badly you treated me? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. I sat down across from her, the financial documents spread between us like evidence in a trial. Let me tell you what I think happened, Vanessa. I think Mom and Dad knew exactly how much debt they were carrying. I think they knew their estate was worthless, maybe even negative, and I think they chose to saddle you with that debt while protecting me from it. Her face went pale. That's not... They wouldn't... Wouldn't they? They spent 34 years making decisions based on what they thought each of us could handle. They gave you everything when times were good because they thought you needed support. But when times got bad, when there were real consequences to face, they gave the debt to their strong, independent daughter who would understand why she got the short end of the stick. Helen, please, I can't lose everything. You're not losing everything. You're losing things that were never really yours to begin with. The house was mortgaged beyond its value, the business was failing, the inheritance was an illusion built on borrowed money. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the small garden Michael and I had planted together. Do you know what I realized, Vanessa? For 34 years, I thought I was the daughter who wasn't good enough. But maybe I was actually the daughter they trusted to survive when everything fell apart. So you won't help me?
I turned back to her. I'm not going to pay $3.2 million to maintain the illusion that you inherited something valuable, but I'll make you a different offer. Her eyes lit up with desperate hope. The foundation I'm establishing will have a small, discretionary fund for emergency assistance to families in crisis. If you apply for a grant with documentation of your financial situation, a plan for getting back on your feet, and a commitment to financial counseling, We might be able to provide some temporary assistance to help you transition to a sustainable living situation." The hope in her eyes died. "A grant? You want me to apply for charity from my own sister? I want you to take responsibility for your situation instead of expecting me to fix it, the same way I had to take responsibility for putting myself through college, for building my career, for funding my own wedding. This is different. This is family." "No, Vanessa. This is exactly the same. You're in a difficult situation and you need help. The question is whether you're willing to work for that help the way I always had to, or whether you think being family entitles you to automatic rescue." She stared at me for a long moment, then gathered up the financial documents. "I can't believe you're being this cruel." "I'm not being cruel. I'm being practical. The same quality Mom and Dad always said I had in abundance." At the door, she turned back one last time. "When I lose the house, when I have to declare bankruptcy, when I'm starting over with nothing, that's going to be on you, Helen." I met her eyes steadily. "No, Vanessa. That's going to be on 34 years of financial decisions made by people who thought money was something that happened to other people. I didn't create this debt, and I'm not responsible for fixing it." After she left, I sat in my quiet living room, surrounded by foundation paperwork, and felt something I'd never experienced before. The peace that comes from making a decision based on principles rather than guilt. My phone rang an hour later. The caller ID showed Attorney Webb's number. "Helen, I wanted to give you a heads up. I received a call from a law firm representing your sister. They're exploring options for contesting your grandfather's will." "On what grounds?" "Undue influence, mental incompetence, familial obligation, the usual strategies when someone is unhappy with an inheritance distribution. I wanted you to know so you wouldn't be blindsided if they proceed." As I hung up the phone, I realized that the ultimate test wasn't just about money. It was about whether I would let guilt and family manipulation drag me back into a system that had never valued me, or whether I would trust in the love of the one person who'd spent 27 years proving I was worth investing in. The answer was surprisingly easy. The legal challenge came exactly 3 weeks later, delivered by a courier who interrupted my Saturday morning breakfast with Michael. The thick envelope contained a formal petition to contest Eduardo Gomez's will, filed by Vanessa Catherine Gomez Clark and supported by signatures from Uncle Roberto, Aunt Carmen, Uncle David, and 6 other relatives who apparently believed they had claims to my grandfather's estate. The document was a masterpiece of legal manipulation, painting Grandpa Eduardo as mentally compromised elderly man who had been unduly influenced by his emotionally manipulative granddaughter to make irrational financial decisions that violated natural family hierarchies and expectations. According to their petition, my 27-year relationship with Grandpa Eduardo, all those fishing trips, homework sessions, and heart-to-heart conversations, was actually evidence of calculated manipulation designed to alienate the deceased from his rightful heirs and secure an unconscionable windfall for myself. They were demanding that the trust fund be dissolved and the money redistributed according to traditional inheritance practices, which apparently meant Vanessa receiving the majority and other family members getting significant portions. I would be allowed to keep a reasonable sum appropriate to my station and contributions. They suggested $500,000, as if they were being generous. Michael read over my shoulder, his jaw tightening with each page. "They're actually arguing that loving your grandfather and spending time with him was a con game." "Look at this part," I said, pointing to a particularly offensive paragraph. "They claim that Grandpa Eduardo's decision to document their favoritism was evidence of senile fixation and paranoid record-keeping inconsistent with rational thought processes."
The cruelest twist was how they'd reframed every cherished memory. My graduation, where only Grandpa Eduardo showed up, evidence of isolation from appropriate family celebrations. The compass necklace he'd given me, inappropriate gift-giving, suggesting compromised judgment. His pride in my teaching career, excessive focus on granddaughter's modest achievements while ignoring more significant family successes. They'd turned 27 years of genuine love and support into evidence of mental illness and manipulation. "Are you going to fight this?" Michael asked. "I'm going to end this," I said quietly. That afternoon, I called Attorney Webb. "I want to schedule a family meeting. Everyone who signed this petition, plus anyone else who wants to attend. I want them all in one room so I can address their concerns directly." "Helen, I'm not sure that's wise. Family meetings in inheritance disputes can become very emotional. Mr. Webb, they've turned my grandfather's love for me into a legal accusation. They've accused me of manipulating a man who showed me more genuine affection than my own parents ever did. I want to face them."
The meeting was scheduled for the following Friday at 2 p.m. in the conference room at Attorney Webb's office. I arrived early and asked him to set up a projector. I'd prepared a presentation that would leave no room for doubt about Grandpa Eduardo's mental competency or the legitimacy of his decisions. They filed in looking like they were attending a corporate board meeting where they expected to divide up a company's assets. Vanessa wore a black suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Uncle Roberto brought his own attorney. Aunt Carmen had printed copies of what looked like budget spreadsheets, showing how the inheritance money could be more fairly distributed. The only person missing was Cousin Patricia, who'd apparently decided that signing the petition was support enough without facing me in person. I stood at the front of the room while they settled into their chairs with the confidence of people who believed they were about to rectify a terrible injustice. "Thank you all for coming," I said calmly. "I understand you have concerns about Grandpa Eduardo's will, particularly his mental state when he made these decisions. I'd like to address those concerns with evidence." I clicked to my first slide, a photograph of Grandpa Eduardo from his 80th birthday party, just 6 months before he died. He was smiling, alert, engaged in conversation with his guests. This is how most of you remember him, I assume. Sharp, articulate, fully competent. What you may not know is that Grandpa Eduardo began planning my trust fund when he was 53 years old, hardly an age when anyone would question his mental capacity. Click. The next slide showed the original trust document, dated 1996. The initial investment was $100,000, made after careful consultation with financial advisors at 3 different firms. Over the following 27 years, he made strategic investment decisions that grew this fund to its current value. I have documentation of every transaction, every consultation, every decision. Would anyone like to argue that he was mentally compromised for 3 decades? Uncomfortable shifting in chairs. No one spoke. Now let's address the claim that I manipulated him through undue influence. Click. A new slide showing a timeline. According to the petition, I allegedly isolated Grandpa Eduardo from family celebrations. Let me show you the actual record. I'd spent days creating this presentation, using Grandpa Eduardo's own meticulous documentation. Slide after slide of evidence. Family gatherings where I was the only one who showed up. Holidays where everyone else was too busy. Birthdays where I was the only family member who remembered. Christmas 2018. Family dinner for 12 people. According to Mom's Facebook posts, it was a magical celebration with all our loved ones. Grandpa Eduardo's diary entry for that day notes that I was the only family member who asked him about his recent doctor's appointment or his volunteer work at the literacy center. Easter 2019. Big celebration at Uncle Roberto's house. 37 people attended.
According to Grandpa Eduardo's notes, I was the only person who sat with him for more than 5 minutes or asked about his stories from the war. Thanksgiving 2020. Vanessa's first holiday hosting at her new house. She posted extensively about the gratitude and family love that filled the day. Grandpa Eduardo's entry, Helen spent 2 hours listening to me tell stories about her grandmother. Everyone else was too busy networking or taking selfies. The room was dead silent now. I could see the recognition dawning on their faces. They were remembering those gatherings, remembering how they'd treated the elderly man who was now worth $100 million to them. The petition suggests that his documentation of family favoritism was evidence of senile paranoia. Let me share some of those supposedly paranoid observations. Click. A slide showing direct quotes from his records. June 2017. Roberto asked me for $50,000 loan for his construction business, said it was urgent. When I asked him about Helen's wedding planning, he said he didn't know she was engaged. She'd announced it 3 months earlier at Easter dinner. Uncle Roberto's face went red. October 2019. Carmen spent 40 minutes telling me about her daughter's college expenses, asked if I'd consider helping with tuition. When I mentioned Helen's innovative reading program winning state recognition, she changed the subject. She doesn't even know Helen is a teacher. Aunt Carmen was staring at her hands. April 2021. David called to ask about investing in his Florida condo. During the same call, he referred to Helen as the quiet one and couldn't remember her husband's name despite meeting Michael at 3 family events. I clicked to the final slide, a photograph of Grandpa Eduardo and me from my wedding day. He was fastening his mother's pearl necklace around my neck, both of us smiling with genuine joy. This man wasn't mentally compromised, and I didn't manipulate him. He was a grandfather who spent 27 years watching his family overlook his granddaughter and decided to do something about it. Every investment, every documentation, every decision was made with complete mental clarity and legal oversight. I turned off the projector and faced them directly. You want to know what undue influence looks like? It's Uncle Roberto asking for business loans while never bothering to learn about my career. It's Aunt Carmen requesting college funds while being unable to remember my husband's name. It's all of you signing a legal petition to steal my inheritance while ignoring me at family gatherings for 34 years.
Vanessa finally spoke, her voice shaky. Helen, we just think there should be more balance. Grandpa Eduardo was family to all of us. Was he? When did any of you last visit him without asking for money? When did you call just to check how he was feeling? When did you attend his doctor's appointments or help him manage his medications or listen to his stories about Grandma Rosa? No one answered. I spent every Sunday afternoon with him for 3 years before he died. Not because I knew about the trust fund. I had no idea it existed. I spent time with him because I loved him, and he loved me. You spent time with him when you needed something. I picked up my purse and headed for the door. Attorney Webb will be in touch about your next steps, but let me be clear. If you proceed with this frivolous lawsuit, I will countersue for harassment and intentional infliction of emotional distress. I will make public every piece of documentation showing how this family treated both Grandpa Eduardo and me. I will ensure that your names are associated with this greed and manipulation in every legal filing and court record. At the door, I turned back one final time. Grandpa Eduardo left me this money because he knew I would use it to help children who feel overlooked and undervalued the way I always did in this family. If you try to take that away from those kids because you think you deserve money from a man you ignored, then you're exactly the people he thought you were. I walked out of that conference room and never looked back. 3 days later, Attorney Webb called to tell me they'd withdrawn the petition. The family who had never valued me when I had nothing now wanted me to believe they loved me when I had everything. But I finally understood the difference between being related to people and being family with them. Real family doesn't wait until you're wealthy to decide you're worth their time.
1 year later, I stood in the sunlit lobby of the Eduardo Gomez Learning Center, watching third grader Marcus Thompson sound out words in a book that 3 months ago would have been impossible for him to read. His face lit up with the same joy I remembered feeling when I finally conquered a difficult passage. That moment when the letters stopped swimming around the page and became a story. "Mrs. Santos," he called out, using my married name with the pride of a child who'd been part of our summer wedding celebration. "Listen to this part about the dragon." I knelt down to his level as he read about a brave knight who won battles not through strength, but through clever thinking and persistence. The metaphor wasn't lost on me. Sometimes the greatest victories come from refusing to give up, not from having natural advantages. The Learning Center was everything I dreamed it could be when Michael and I first sketched out plans on our kitchen table. 30 full-time reading specialists working with children from 6 school districts. A summer camp program that turned learning differences into learning adventures. Family counseling services that helped parents understand that different didn't mean less capable. And scholarship programs that ensured no child would struggle alone the way I had in this family. We'd served over 2,000 children in our first year, and the waiting list kept growing. Teachers were calling from 3 states away asking if we could expand our services. Universities were requesting our research data on dyslexia interventions. The foundation that had started as Grandpa Eduardo's love letter to me was becoming a love letter to every overlooked child who just needed someone to believe in their potential. "Mrs. Santos," a voice behind me belonged to Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the clinical psychologist we'd hired to lead our family support programs. "There's someone here to see you. She says she's your sister." My heart did a small flip. I hadn't spoken to Vanessa since the lawsuit was withdrawn. According to family gossip that reached me through Michael's mother-in-law, she had declared bankruptcy 6 months ago and moved into a modest apartment in Clearwater. The house on Magnolia Lane had been sold to pay creditors, and she was working as a financial analyst for a small firm that specialized in debt restructuring. Ironic, but apparently therapeutic. I found her in my office, standing at the window that looked out over our playground, where children with learning disabilities were laughing and playing together during their lunch break. She looked different, smaller somehow, wearing simple clothes and no makeup, her hair in a practical ponytail rather than the styled perfection she'd maintained for 30 years. "Hello, Helen." "Hello, Vanessa. I'm surprised to see you here." She turned from the window and I was shocked to see genuine humility in her eyes. "I wanted to see what you'd built with Grandpa Eduardo's money. I needed to understand what this was all for. And what do you think?" "I think I finally get it." She gestured toward the playground. "Those kids out there, they remind me of you at that age, struggling with things that came easily to me, working twice as hard for half the recognition." Inside the wrapping was a photo album I'd never seen before, filled with pictures I didn't know existed. Page after page of moments that had been hidden away. Me at age 7, helping Grandpa Eduardo in his garden. Me at 12, building a birdhouse with him in his workshop. Me at 16, the 2 of us laughing over a chess game. Me at 25, walking with him through the botanical gardens on one of our Sunday afternoons. "Mom took these?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "She took hundreds of photos of you and Grandpa Eduardo over the years. I found boxes of them. She never shared them, never put them in the family albums, but she was documenting your relationship just like he was." I stared at a picture of Grandpa Eduardo teaching me to fish, both of us covered in mud and grinning like we'd discovered buried treasure. "I don't understand. Why would she hide these?" Vanessa sat down across from me, tears starting to form in her eyes. "I think she knew. Deep down, I think she always knew that what you 2 had was special, and she was ashamed of how she treated you. These photos, they're like a secret record of the love she witnessed but couldn't acknowledge." She flipped to a page near the back of the album. There, tucked between photos, was a letter in Mom's handwriting addressed to me, but never sent. "My dearest Helen," it began. "I am writing this letter that I will never have the courage to give you, because I need to tell someone the truth I can't tell anyone else. You are not the daughter who needed less. You are the daughter I failed. Every time I celebrated Vanessa's achievements while dismissing yours, every time I gave her advantages while telling you to be self-reliant, every time I chose her needs over your feelings, I was failing as your mother. I told myself I was making you stronger, but really I was just taking the easy path. Vanessa's success was simple to support. It required money and praise. Your success was harder to nurture. It required understanding, patience, and admitting that I didn't always know how to help you. I was too proud and too scared to learn. Your grandfather sees what I should have seen all along. You are remarkable, not because you survived our neglect, but because you transformed it into empathy for others. You became the kind of person who helps struggling children because you remember what it felt like to struggle alone. I don't know how to fix what I've broken between us, but I need you to know that your worth was never in question. My ability to see it was. I love you, Helen. I have always loved you. I just never knew how to show it in the way you needed. Mom. The letter was dated just 2 months before the car accident. I looked up at Vanessa through my tears. She wrote this and never sent it? I think she was planning to. I found a sealed envelope with your name on it in her desk drawer, but the letter was still in her diary. Maybe she was waiting for the right moment, or maybe she was still too afraid. We sat in silence for a long moment, both crying over the mother who had loved me but couldn't say it, the sister I'd lost to years of resentment, and the grandfather whose love had saved us all in different ways. Vanessa, I'm sorry about everything you've been through this year. The divorce, the bankruptcy, losing the house. She wiped her eyes and managed a small smile. Don't be sorry. It was the best thing that could have happened to me. For the first time in my life, I had to survive on my own merit instead of family money or my husband's connections. It was terrifying and hard, and the most growing I've done in 30 years. Are you okay now? I'm getting there. My job pays well enough for a decent life, and I'm learning to appreciate things I'd never noticed before. Simple things, like cooking my own meals and reading library books, and having friends who like me for myself instead of my family's money. She paused. I'm learning to be the person I might have been if I hadn't been handed everything. She stood up to leave, then turned back. Vanessa, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, and I'm not asking for it. But I want you to know that watching what you've built here, seeing how you've turned your pain into purpose, it's made me proud to be your sister, even if I don't deserve to call myself dad anymore. You're still my sister, Vanessa. You always will be. Can I ask you something? If you could go back and change how we grew up, would you? I thought about it for a long moment, looking out at the playground where children who struggled like I had were finding their voices and building their confidence. No, I said finally, because if I'd grown up differently, I might not have understood what these kids needed. If I'd been the golden child, I might never have developed the empathy to see overlooked children. If I'd gotten everything easily, I might not have learned the persistence that makes me a good advocate for kids with learning differences. And if our parents had treated me better, I might not have formed such a deep bond with Grandpa Eduardo. Exactly. Their neglect drove me to him, and his love created all of this. In a twisted way, their failure as parents enabled his success as a grandfather.
After Vanessa left, I sat in my office holding Mom's unsent letter and thinking about the strange mathematics of family love. Sometimes the people who hurt us most are also the people who inadvertently shape us into who we're meant to become. Sometimes rejection redirects us toward the love we actually need. Sometimes being overlooked teaches us to see others who are invisible. That evening, Michael and I walked through the learning center after all the children had gone home. The walls were covered with artwork created by kids who'd learned that their dyslexia made them creative thinkers, their ADHD made them energetic innovators, their learning differences made them beautifully unique. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Cutting ties with most of your family?" "I didn't cut ties with family," I said, taking his hand. "I cut ties with people who happen to be related to me. My real family is right here. You, the children we serve, the teachers who believe in these kids, Attorney Webb who protected Grandpa Eduardo's wishes, even Vanessa, now that she's learning who she really is." We stopped in front of a photo gallery featuring some of our success stories, children who'd gone from struggling readers to confident students, kids who'd discovered that being different was their superpower, families who'd learned to celebrate unique learning styles instead of trying to fix them. "Your grandfather would be so proud," Michael said. "He knew this would happen. That's the amazing part. He didn't just leave me money, he left me the resources to become the person he always believed I could be." As we locked up the building and headed home to our life that was built on love rather than obligation, I thought about the compass necklace still hanging around my neck. Grandpa Eduardo had been right. It didn't just show direction, it reminded you how far you'd traveled. I'd traveled from the overlooked daughter who accepted $50 with gratitude to the woman who turned nearly $100 million into hope for thousands of children. I'd traveled from seeking approval from people who couldn't see my worth to creating a foundation that ensured other overlooked kids would be seen and valued. Most importantly, I'd learned that inheritance isn't just about money or property or family heirlooms. The greatest inheritance is the belief that you deserve love, investment, and respect. And sometimes that belief has to be gifted to you by someone who sees your worth even when you can't see it yourself. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever been told you're too independent when what you really needed was support, if you've ever wondered if the people who should love you most actually see you at all, remember that your worth isn't determined by their vision. Sometimes the most important family members are the ones who choose to see you clearly and love you completely. And sometimes the greatest revenge against those who underestimated you is building a life so beautiful and meaningful that their opinion becomes completely irrelevant. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.